All right, everyone, welcome back to another video. I'm very stoked on all the support and to be knocking out these long form content videos for you guys. The critiques were very helpful, so I appreciate all of the support and all of that. Very stoked to be doing this. Now, if you don't know who I am, my name is Griffin Davis. I'm a DP based out of New York City right now, and I'm learning, growing, developing, and pushing my career as much as I possibly can at the moment. But today I want to create a video of another lighting breakdown and talk through a shoot I did back in November that was a fashion one and that I'm very proud of and excited to show off. This one was a little bit more stylized and a little more different than what I originally had in my portfolio, but again, I'm very happy and pretty excited to see this project come to life. Now, I'll show off one of the scenes that we got to do and work on for this shoot, and then we can talk about it after. So that is one scene like I mentioned. Again, I'm really proud of this one. It is definitely very stylized and a little bit different than anything I've had in my portfolio, but I think it turned out great and it's definitely a cool and awesome look that the stylist and the director really liked and appreciated. Now, I do want to dive into the lighting of all this, but there were definitely a lot of constrictions actually for this specific shoot that I want to talk through and mention before diving into the lighting, because it might help explain why we chose some of the choices that we did. Now, off the jump, we were actually working within an awesome black box studio, which is great and very helpful. However, we only were able to use the supplies that they had offered in that black box studio. We didn't have a gaffer or key grip with their own kit to bring in or a lighting package to bring in. We just had the lights and sources that they had available within that studio space. Now, it wasn't super unlimited, but it also wasn't super limited. We had enough to work with and we thought we could run with it and do what we can to make the best product we could. Okay, so that is one little constraint. Now, our next constraint was actually the location itself. While we were in a nice, awesome black box, we were working within a pre-built living room studio space that was 3 walls. This space sounds awesome to work within and definitely gives you more flexibility when shooting, especially for overhead lighting or what have you. However, we didn't have a lot of lighting to work with, like I mentioned. And this studio space that they pre-built was actually a little bit too small than I would have liked or appreciated. So this definitely limited where we could put the camera or where we could shoot. And for some reference on what the space looked like, it was 3 walls, 1 wall with 2 windows, 1 wall with 1 single door, and the other wall behind us, which we won't show, was actually just a white wall. So there wasn't a lot of awesome visually places to shoot into, and shooting into the corner just wasn't gonna work out super well. So after talking and scouting with the director, we ended up just deciding to shoot directly into the windows that we had available. And being that those windows just looked out into a black void or the black box, you can definitely tell that we had some initial lighting things to figure out. Now, before diving super deep into the actual specifics of how we lit the scene, I want to talk about set design and how that really helped us with this project. Now, as a younger DP or cinematographer or working on film crews, it's about the camera, right? Like, ooh, camera, shiny things. And we had the lens, we had this and that, and you don't really focus on more of the details that actually bring your story to life. But as you grow and learn and develop, you definitely understand that the other roles on set are super valuable to you as a DP, and specifically set designers and production designers, very, very important, especially wardrobe. But being a fashion shoot, we had that one secured in the bag. So that being said, production design was going to be what really amplified the space that we were shooting in and was going to be really helpful when it came to actually shooting with those windows in the background. So going to, again, a site scout and pre-production, I wanted to really make sure that we talked through with the set designer and that they were there to kind of understand what our problems were and what we needed to fix and what they could offer. So after talking with the production designer, the director, and myself on the pre-production sort of site scout, and being that we were gonna shoot directly into the windows, the most obvious and thing that we all decided was to actually just blow out the windows. Now, not having a crazy amount of gear or really diffusion, we worked with the set designer specifically to create a sort of double sheared situation with the windows. Having access to the back wall, we were able to put a thicker, more of a true curtain behind the windows that were white, and as well as a more sheer in the front of the windows to give us a little bit more awesome, cute texture. So having both of those pieces of diffusion, we were able to, one, create a clean line of no black showing through the windows, but also we were able to pump light through those to just blow out the windows in a way that worked well. So jumping into the lights we actually used, we had a bunch of Airy L7Cs. I think these are like 700 watt lights that are bicolor or full RGB, I'm pretty sure. That probably is what it is. I'd never used these before, but the gaffer had and said that they were great and they should work fine, and they definitely did. But luckily for us, they actually already had two rigged up to the ceiling for the windows specifically. However, they weren't exactly in the proper pointed location as we would like, so it took a little bit of tweaking and a little bit of closing off the barn doors to get the sort of beam of light that we really wanted that would make a nice even splay on both windows. So boom, that is one problem solved. And just to say that sometimes, it is just problem solving, filmmaking and working on set and lighting things, it is just one big puzzle and a problem solving thing that you get to do and figure out, which is one of the reasons why I freaking love DPing, lighting, and filmmaking. But to move on to our actual key light and the main source of everything, let's jump into that. So now, originally, if I had access to more gear and more things, I would have loved to do a booklight scenario. If you don't know what a booklight scenario, it is basically when you have a light source that is pointed at a bounce card. It could be a white foam board or reflector, what have you, and it is bouncing off of this reflector into a bigger 8 by 12 by 6 by of diffusion, from a grid to shower cloth to what have you. This basically creates super soft light. Although, like I mentioned, we didn't have the gear that I really wanted, and the only sort of bigger diffusion that we had was a 4 by that wasn't going to be large enough of a source for our talent, let alone really control the light in the way we need it to. Although thankfully we had a couple 4 by 4 pizza boxes, or foam core if you will, that's just white, that we could still soften up the light with and bounce it through. So off the rip, we threw out one L7C, which I thought would be enough at first, and we just kind of raised up the foam core and pointed the light down low, and that way it bounces and spills over all of our talent nicely and a little bit more on the top side of things. Quickly, however, we learned that this output just wasn't enough, and it wasn't creating enough fill or really key light that we needed, and the back was still overpowering it. So luckily we had a couple extras L7Cs running around, another piece of foam core, so we were able to double everything up. So instead of just one light down below and one foam core, we had 2 lights down below and 2 foam cores up top spilling into our talent, which again really created a nice wide soft look that gave us enough output this time. However, it was a little bit too much spilly, if you will. So a way to control that was we actually ended up taking our boards up here and coving them a little bit as like a triangle. So we had 2 pieces, boom, light was shooting down this way. Instead of flooding out all everywhere, we were able to kind of tighten it up, and it just floods a little bit more directly. So coves are great, very helpful. We've used them all the time on set. Would definitely recommend trying one out. But that is essentially what we did for our key light. This created a nice controlled look and really gave us a nice soft look as well. I ideally would have loved a little bit more of a softer light with that book light, but being the resources what we had, this was going to be what did the trick. So this created a nice soft look along talent for our left side of frame, and then we had the light coming in the back, which wasn't overpowering at all, but definitely gave us a nice backlight for our characters and a nice hair light, if you will. So boom, pretty much 4 lights, and we're set up nicely. There were a couple more things that we did to kind of curate the image a little bit. One of those being is we obviously see a lamp in the middle of the frame. That is our practical. We had an MC, I think, taped there, or some little light. I remember the gaffer having a really hard time to make it look straight. Those lamp lights are always a fun struggle and seem to take way longer than they should if you don't have one of those B7C lights. But that just added a little bit more texture to the wall and maybe just a little bit of fill for the back characters. But again, mainly for that table and the wall, just adding texture and depth to our image. Now for our last little detail, you're not gonna see it in camera because we fixed it. However, there was a lot of spill still from our cove light, key light scenario that was spilling onto the left of frame on the wall. And it was just a little too hot and looked very unnatural. Now I do know this is very stylized and not the most natural lighting scenario and shoot. However, it was just a super hot light that did not fit and we wanted to kind of cut off. So we grabbed a 4x4 floppy, or a big, black solid if you don't know what I'm talking about, and we're able to kind of move that in a way as a cutter to cut off the light spilling onto the wall from the cove light. This again just helped us and not have a hot spot within the wall or the image. But boom, that is essentially how we lit this one scene from this fashion shoot. There were a couple others that maybe I'll get to go in the future. However, I'm very proud of how this one turned out, being our limitations and our location and what have you. So hopefully this video was helpful a little bit, or at least entertaining somewhat. Again, I'm gonna have a lot of fun making these videos and these breakdowns, hopefully to bring more to you. I do know that I would love to have more BTS footage for the future. And 4 more breakdowns. These shoots weren't really shot in the way that I would, I didn't think ahead basically when shooting the actual shoots to the breakdown videos. So working on that for future ones. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. If you made it all the way, really appreciate it. I hope to see you on another one. All right. That took a couple tries, but we did it. Appreciate it.